I have been eagerly awaiting this parcel. I can't really show you, but it's kind of taken a little bit of a journey. Oh, well, actually, the person who sent it to me, whose name is Itzy, she has been just as eagerly waiting for it to get to me, and it got held up, and we couldn't figure out if it was being held up at customs, but it ended up being, apparently, if you're sending internationally, or I guess at all, you can't send to a P.O. box through FedEx. So, whoops, had to chop that out because there's another package with her address right on the front of it. Anyways, she finally was able to get a hold of them and find out where it was, and then I had to call them and give them my regular address, and so, yes, it has made its way here. I actually promised her I wouldn't look. I know what's in here, but I said, oh, I won't look at it until we do a session on Saturday. Stop. Isabel's all geared up. She thinks that, yeah, I give her a treat. I started keeping treats on my table because she thinks she's going to get a treat. There you go. I'm getting a bad habit. Anyways, I said I would look through the cards until I saw her on Saturday. She's like, no. And I was really going to, but I don't think I can. How cute is this? I'm going to... Oh, but it's so sweet. I'm not obviously going to share the little note, but it is so sweet. I just adore Etsy. She is one of my, look at it. And look, she decorated it for me all up, which I love. And she made sure it was well wrapped, which of course I am so excited about. Now, what is to me very exciting about this, I love... obviously, I mean, that's stupid. Oh, not stupid. That's silly. Obviously, I love getting decks from people. That's, goes without saying. But one of the things I really love about it is that people, whatever deck it is, for whatever reason, they feel like that this is something that either they really love and they want to share that, or that they really think that I'm going to like, and maybe or just want to see my opinion on a deck. And so that to me is a lot of fun, just to kind of see what things that people A, are interested in loving themselves, and B, look at this, B, want to see what I think about things. Now, you can see what this is. I had said earlier that the next two decks that I wanted to get was going to be a Marseille deck. I'm going to be very careful. A Marseille deck as well as a Thoth deck, so that I had, see, I love this. Okay, I'm going to take this off and then I'm going to stop for a second so I can talk. Isabel, no. She wants the pop bubble wrap. The Marseille deck as well as the Thoth, which I have been sent. I have my other trimmed one over there, but here's the one that still has the borders on because I was working with it. Because I really wanted to kind of hit on all the systems, because especially when I was doing my playing card video, I thought to myself, if you can read playing cards, you can read the Marseille. I mean, it's really no different. They're pip cards, and that's what a playing card deck is. Excuse me. So, oh, okay. So anyways, then I had a mentoring session with Etsy, and she was showing me her deck that was her mother's. I mean, how amazing is that, to have your mother's deck? Her mother has passed on, and she has, her mother read Lenormand as well as tarot, and she always used a Marseille deck, and she always used, all of her decks were from the same little shop in Italy. And so, we were looking at them, and they were some older ones, like from the 70s, and they had, the boxes looked, like a box, but this side was completely open, and then there were like 2 or 3 ribbons that tied here that kept the cards from sliding out. Very neat. I told Etsy to she needs to put a picture of them up on Instagram because they're really neat to see. So we were looking at them, and you know, we finished and got off of our thing, and we talked about the Marseille. Look, it has a what's that called? A seal. It has a seal on it, which is just awesome. So it's got this, you know, hard box. Obviously, they don't do the ribbons anymore. Understandably, it was leaving things open, but they don't do that anymore. But this is, she found the same shop because she had the box, and she tracked the shop down in Italy and was able to get me a card. She's like, I really hope this resonates with you. I didn't know, you know, she told me after the fact. She's like, I found, you know, I was looking at my mother's boxes, and she, you know, was able to see the shop name, and she was able to track it down and pick one up for me. So this is just such a special gift. I mean, again, we spent some time really looking through it, and you know, of course, talking about our mother and things. So it's so special. And then, like I said, it's a box, but then it has like a card. It feels like an actual one of the actual cards of the magician card. And it has that glued on the top of it then with a seal on it. I mean, it's just so cool because it's cool. Because I'm American and I think these things are cool. This item is created by hand. Any imperfection or variations are due to its workmanship and are not considered as defects. See, again, like these are all cut, and you can just see they're not cut by a machine. They're not cut completely straight. I'm just so, and it has even the number, 78 cards, 1,035 out of 2,000. This is where I guess it's from, in Italy. I'm just so excited about this that, oops, I don't want to, okay, I'm going to be so careful. There we go, okay. Oh, look at this. Look at it. I mean, it is completely, this is like a handmade deck. And her, like I said, all of her mother's decks, she has a few of her mother's decks, and they were all from this exact same little shop. I mean, how awesome is that? It's just, I just love things like that. It just makes this Isabel as being a pain in my butt. No. No. And she is eaten, so there's like nothing wrong with her. So we're going to ignore her because I'm so excited about this. I'm moving the knife out of the way. So I'm just so excited. I'm going to have to see if this shop has, oh, let me show you the backs. Just these beautiful, simple backs. Okay, I'm back. I simply had to change out the background because I'm so excited. And I had to eat lunch. My lunch finished cooking, and then I was able to find that Itzy was on a line, or she was on Skype, so I was able to talk to her. Plus, while I was eating lunch, I was Googling, and I actually found the shop. Well, I found a YouTube video of a walkthrough of this shop. This, I cannot say this. Let's see if it will zoom in, focus. El Meneghello from Milan, and this is this amazing shop. And so I found this video where they walk through the shop. It shows him, as you can see, this box. You know, this is a regular, it's a nice sturdy box, and then it's wrapped with this print that's on it, and you can see him wrapping, like they do everything in this little shop, and it's so amazing. So I'll put a link to that in the description. Please watch it. It's so neat. And I also found his actual website where you can order decks online, and I'll put a link to that as well. So yes, so then when I came back, I'm like, oh, I need to put, you know, my pretty background on for this, so I can do that. So as I said, it does say on here, this item is created by hand. Any imperfections or variations are due to its workmanship and are not to be considered as defects. So these are obviously printed out, then hand cut, and you can see, as I showed you, you can see that they were hand cut. Some of them do have very thin, you know, where the white, you know, the actual reprinting, and so I may clean that up a little bit, but I'm so in love with this. And this is from the Swiss version from 1804. He did a run of 2,000 copies, and this is 1,035. And because I just talked to Etsy, she also purchased one of these for herself. This was her favorite of her mother's. Her mother has some beautiful Marseille decks, and from this shop. I can't even remember what I said and didn't say, but they're all from this one shop, which is how she was able to track it down and call them and get a hold of this. And she got one for herself so she can put her mother's up. I told her, I'm like, please put a picture of your mother's on your Instagram, and I'll put her Instagram name in the description box below, and hopefully she will do that. So I'm just so psyched. Because did I say show you this gorgeous seal on it? Yes, I did. Okay, so let's take a look at the cards now that we have the beautiful, more appropriate backing. I hope I didn't mess these up. I don't think I did, but if I did, we'll straighten it out. So let me show you. Here are the backings, which are the same backings as her mother's. And they are slightly shorter than a Llewellyn, and then they are thinner. So in width-wise, they kind of feel more like a Lo Scarabeo deck, but they're definitely shorter by a smidge of Llewellyn. So let's go ahead and zoom in. Okay, before we get started on the walkthrough, I just wanted to say a couple things that I have found to be quite fascinating. When I decided to put the Marseille onto my list, my goals were to pick up the next two decks that I was going to purchase was the Thoth and the Marseille, so that I had obviously all three branches of tarot, and so that I could learn a little bit more about them. I have to admit, now I have both of them. I have my other trim Thoth is over, excuse me, is over there being busy, but I was doing some studying here, so I have this right here. I have to say that this, was obviously the deck that I thought was going to be taking some studying, which is certainly the case. And I thought about the Marseille deck as more along the lines of, okay, well, I read playing cards. It's a playing card deck, basically, and I just need to know my numerology and my elements, and bam, I've got this covered. Which is true. You can either have your pip cards just memorized, or have an understanding of your numbers and your suits, and then you just, puzzle piece those together, and that gets you quite far. But there's a lot more to the Marseille deck than that. And so I did pick up, because I knew, obviously, that I was getting this, I picked up a book called Tarot, The Open Reading by Yoav Ben Dov. It had decent reviews. It wasn't horribly expensive, and so I just thought, okay, well, I'm going to get something out of this anyways. Yeah. So what was fascinating for me about this book was, and I still have more reading on it to do, but the history of the tarot deck was quite fascinating, because it really quite goes into the origin of tarot as much as we know. They talk about it in northern Italy in the 15th century, and then obviously having undergone significant changes he talks about before it stabilizes into what we know it as today. It does talk about there having some from China and India, there being some similar, even some Muslim playing cards that had some basis in the minors, but that the majors seems to be a more European addition to this on top of everything. So that was interesting. Again, it wasn't that it was anything that I didn't know, but they did a really good job kind kind of leaning, seeing how it went into France and Germany and Switzerland. And then it talks about the complete tarot deck continued to exist, but after the 18th century, it was used mainly for fortune tellers and mystics. And so it talked about that. It goes into quite a lot of discussion about the majors, because while the minors are directly tied into playing cards, there really isn't so much in terms of the question of whether the majors were part of the actual playing card, or whether those did have more mystical intentions even from the beginning. In the end, I think he says, as well as I say, it doesn't really matter, because it ended up, people have used all kinds of things from sticks and stones and bones and all sorts of other things to divine with. Most playing games in some way or another have been turned into ways of divination, and so that even if it was strictly just a card deck that was transmuted into eventually what we know of as today in terms of reading tarot, that doesn't do anything. It doesn't bother me one way or another. I don't need it to have a mystical past steeped in the lore of Atlantis or something like that in order to enjoy it. But it does go through kind of what some of the ideas were, as it passed along. But it really goes into quite a lot of information. And so that's been quite interesting. Then it goes into the French school, because it does kind of show where there was a split. And then we have the French school. And then it goes to the English school, which would then be with the Golden Dawn. And the French school and the English school do have different astrological associations and even Kabbalah associations with the deck. And so that was interesting to know. Again, I knew more about the Golden Dawn coming from Rider-Waite-Smith based decks. That is certainly what I know more about, because even Crowley, which would be the Thoth tradition, was through the Golden Dawn. And so they go in and talk about that. They didn't also talk about tarot in the New Age, how then it started to shift into this New Age thing, which started to go psychological versus mystical. And so they kind of bring that in there as well, which is quite interesting. It does talk about how the New Age movement not only popularized the use of tarot in the English school, but it transformed it. So that was also quite interesting. And then it comes back to the Tarot de Marseille. But it says in the 17th and 18th centuries, the city of Marseille in southern France became a leading center of card productions, and that the printers there adopted a standard model for the tarot cards. And the decks that they created over the years varied in elaboration of details and richness of coloring, but that the main themes and element of each card remained the same. And so that was also quite interesting. So went into the English decks. There's quite a bit on sort of the history of tarot, and then the way that the Marseille decks have shifted and changed, and the popular ones, and it gets up to his own deck, I think, that he worked on, which is the CBD Tarot de Marseille, which I don't know what that is. I didn't look it up to see. I'm assuming it's the pictures that we see in this book. So he goes into that process there, and then he goes into a series of, how you set up a reading session, how you shuffle the cards, goes quite in depth into that type of thing, which is, again, quite interesting. Something that as long, I think, as you're going to come up with your own things. But I did quite like some of the stuff that he was talking about. But then he gets into a section about the symbolic language, and this is where it gets to me to be quite interesting, just in terms of understanding that the Marseille deck is not just okay, here's our roots, here's where it comes from, but it's just a more stripped down version of the Rider-Waite-Smith, or it's just a stripped down version of the Thoth, something along the lines. Like this is originally where things came out of, and people read for so long off of this, and it has its own sort of key things in that don't always jive with or are the same as the Rider-Waite-Smith. And so while you can take a memorization of the Rider-Waite-Smith pips and apply them to this, I think you're kind of missing out then on the experience of reading with Marseille. And so in order to discuss that, he talks about the main elements. So it says, in the following sections, I present the main elements of a symbolic language that can be applied to the Tarot de Marseille: directions, colors, and shades, numbers, figures, and body parts. Since the Tarot de Marseille, or Marseille, I need to keep looking that up, is the original basis for almost all other tarot decks in use today, many elements in this symbolic language can fit other decks as well. It does then go into talking about cultural and ethnic biases in the decks. I mean, clearly these were made, this particular deck was made in 1804. There were biases to white people, to heterosexual unions and such as that, and entered to Christian religion. That is simply the nature of the place and the time in which these came out. And so they do talk about that. So then it gets into a lot of discussion that is, to me, fascinating about directions. In some ways, I feel you can feel a little bit of the Lenormand, and I know that people use directions in reading tarot, and I do a little bit, but I don't do it a ton, and this is something I will be doing with the Marseille, because it is very interesting to see the directions, and it talks about like the moving left to right. You're kind of moving into the future and going open, opening up, whereas going backwards is going backwards and also closing up. So right here it talks about we can also think about the right direction as expansion and moving out, while the left represents retraction and drawing in. So it goes into a lot about directionality. That's quite interesting, I think. Also talks about the sides of the body, and you can kind of see where other people have underlined in these books, which is sometimes helpful and sometimes not. Sometimes I think, look at them and say, why did you underline that? And then, why am I underlining this and nobody else is? The right side of the body is taken to represent hardness, action, and initiative. The left side represents softness, reception, and containment. Although understanding which side is which, depending on whether you're seeing a mirror image of yourself or it's as if you're actually looking at the person sitting there, that becomes a little bit tricky, and it does go into that. So it goes about directions. Then it talks about up and down, and Asi and I have already had conversations about this. But so the book was interesting. We'll see, as we see later when we discuss the significance of body parts, the top part of the card because these cards are skinny and they're kind of made to be cut in half, and they're almost like two squares. If you were so horrific as to fold these in half, you would have a nice little square there. The top part can represent higher functions of reason and emotion, while the bottom part represents the basic or lower functions of body and desire. So that's also interesting. There's also where you break it into three. In some of the cards in the major suit, there's also a third level, which is an abyss, which appears sometimes opening in the ground or as a black surface at the bottom of the card. And the abyss may represent deep forces acting in the subconscious, unconscious mind, hidden dark passions and things like that. And so that is also something to pay attention to. So there can, in a way, be more like three, so that you have the higher reason and emotion, you have the more base things, and then you sometimes have the unconscious or the subconscious dark areas, which is, again, very interesting. You can also, they said, really pay attention to the flow lines. When you pay attention to the axes, both the vertical, I'm going to get these wrong, vertical axis and horizontal axis, you'll start to see flow lines when you're laying the cards out. And so that's something that also you will be paying attention to. So that's fantastic. Then it goes into colors, which is, of course, something I've really been working with in the Thoth deck as well, because every single color in the Thoth deck is there for a very specific purpose. It does talk about how the these were line art. So these decks were, you know, line art out, and then they put something over the top of them, because you can see like the coloration will be in blobs sometimes. It's not, it's kind of looks like it's smeared on, and it's because they would do the line art and they would put this sheet that has, you know, specific holes to where they want it to go, and just smear paint over it. And so it would kind of make this blobbed on, you know, it was the quickest way, you know, that they could quickly paint these things. So you can see, I mean, you can see them in the cards, how they're kind of sometimes off of where they should be, you know, and sometimes they're just kind of blobbing in. And that's because of the way in which they colored things, which was really neat. It talks about, to compensate for the limited color scale which was made necessary by the stencil color technique, traditional tarot card makers introduced a distinction between clear areas, which are plain colored, and shaded areas covered with parallel black lines in addition to their coloring. So you're also wanting to pay attention to the shading, because they didn't have a bunch of colors, and so that would darken the colors, and that was the patterns. Also have things that mean things. It's so wonderful. The shaded part can represent a dark or hidden aspect of an issue, where the clear side can represent a lit, visible. Other areas, such as the ground formation, bodies of water, and some things are filled with long parallel lines. When the lines are wavy, they might express movement and instability. When they're straight, it may be more solid and stable. So it's so fascinating to me. It's so fascinating to me. So yeah. I just keep highlighting random things so that I go back and look at them. I mean, I've already read this once, but generally there's between 7 and 10 colors. You know, you've got skin tone, you have white created by not obviously coloring in. You have red, you have a dark blue, a light blue, you have a greenish, you have a yellow, you have, I said red. Those seem to be the main colors so you have a lighter blue, a darker blue, yellow, red. Seems to be sort of the main colors, and some greens, and then the mixing of darker greens and such like that are the colors. And so then it gets into all the colors. You know, white is about the unification of all colors, light from a superior source, spirituality. Black is always in the illustrated lines, and it goes into that. Yellow has a warm, illuminated, optimistic. Red being strong and dynamic and passion. Blue being a deep, calm color. Light blue being about spirituality. Green for earthy things. You know, then you have the flesh representing the body and the physicality of things. So yeah, it goes really into the colors that are there and that are dominating in a particular card. So interesting. I know some people are like, and then it goes into numbers, which is, you know, something I've always been fascinated with. And so it really gets into talking about numerology and the different types of numerology, the different systems. And then it goes into combining elements from various systems. He gives a list of meanings for the first 10 numbers, and, you know, talks about the one, obviously, the beginnings. It's an open process. It can represent wholeness also. And then you have 2, which is opposition, duality, polarity. It goes into all. It's so interesting. The third unit breaks the stalemate of the number 2 and adds movement and creation, because a third is created. 4 is solid, stable, secure. And it's earthly, material, that kind of thing, such as like the Emperor. You know, and then you have the 5, which breaks up the stability of the 4, which is, you know, instability, conflict, that we know what the number 5s represent. 6 expresses harmony and shows a union, like you'll have 6 is a mirror, 3 and 3 mirror. And so, yeah, it goes into all kinds of stuff going on. To 7 creates a new movement. 8 is a different combinations of 2s and 4s. And, it's so fascinating to me. 9 is that almost there kind of card, like the 9 of Wands, like you just have to, you know, push through, just you're almost there. And then 10 being sort of the completion number, but it goes into quite an interesting discussion on it. talks about the figures themselves, all about the figures, where the feet are, and then it gets into body parts where actually the legs and the feet. So if you're looking at an image, the legs and the feet are the earth in the card. They represent the suit of coins, and it's what we're standing on. Are the feet firmly planted? Are they balanced? Are they up on tiptoes? All that kind of consideration. We're looking in the actual card itself at the earth elements. And then when we look to the groin area, of course, we're talking about passion and sensuality and sexuality. And this is about the fire and the wand suit. And then we get up to the heart area and chest area, and we're looking at the area of the heart, of the cups, of the emotions. And then up in the head area of the figure, we're looking at the mind and the intellect. And so that we can look at those areas and the figure and see, are they looking balanced? Are they imbalanced? You know, what's going on? This people, you know, obviously their feet, which should be grounded, are up in the air. They're not stable. You know, you start to look at all these things. This, of course, flips it all upside down. So it's just fascinating ways that you can get so much that's going on. So I'm trying to like just get at even the titles and the numbers. There are things, there are mix-ups, there are things that are not right on the titles, and people would use those as well as divination. Sometimes they're plural words, and then sometimes it's singular all of a sudden. There's a couple that randomly have the title on the side instead of, you know, on the bottom. I want to say it was the wands. We'll see when we get through it, but the coins, the page of coins, I think, has the wrong name on the bottom. So they would actually use that as well to tell them some things. It's just, it's really fascinating. Of course, it gets into the suits. Is there anything else I want to quickly? The Fool's Journey, it goes through the whole Fool's Journey. It's really got a lot of information in this book that I'm obviously not going to... It does go into the Kabbalah letters, and it gives a graph of the sort of French way that it was done versus the English way that it's the correspondence. So, for example, with the magician, we have it as Aleph, whereas the English would have it as Bet. And so it goes through and does a listing of that, which will be interesting when I'm working on that with the Thoth Tarot. And then it goes through each of the cards and all information about each of the cards. I'll get to the Lover's card and show you that when I get to the Lover's card, because that's really interesting. So I'm going to stop there for a minute, but I am going to get back to this for a second when we get to the minors, because I guess my purpose for this is to say that it's not just a, you know, okay, this is a cool old deck where things came from, but it's just a stripped down version of XYZ. It's not. Like, it has its own, people read with this for, you know, however long, I'm not going to say some random number, but for a very long time, and developed a system of working with these cards that's quite fascinating and isn't just a, you know, stripped down version of the Rider-Waite-Smith. It's its own version that the Rider-Waite-Smith kind of built from. Okay, so you're going to pretty much see traditional imagery. I think that the Rider-Waite-Smith stayed fairly close to the original with the trump cards or the major arcana cards, and I apologize for Isabel. I have stopped and started this 20 times because she is being overprotective of our garbage cans. So ignore her gruffing in the background. So here we have the Fool with his pack and his staff, and I love his face. He has a very open face, and he is setting off on the journey. We even have the little dog here in the background. Here we have what would be the juggler. I believe this is what this would translate as the juggler, just from having read things on the Thoth. But this is the magician. He is much more of a street magician, much more of an illusionist and a trickster than what we see in the Rider-Waite-Smith juggler or magician, where it's much more of a mystical, magical magician, versus this is a little bit more of the street magician feel to this particular card. Here we have what I guess would be the Papist, but this is the High Priestess. She has her Book of Knowledge here. She has her chair or her throne that she's sitting at, and kind of veiled in the background. She seems to be sitting on like the crescent moon. We do have that idea there. Obviously, as she is seated, she is very well covered. That's the other thing to watch for in this deck, and probably, in all honesty, most of the decks. I guess I never paid so much attention to it, but they move from clothed to nudity as it progresses along the journey in a way that's quite interesting. Or it's interesting to me, I should say. Here we have what would be the Empress, which I think she's quite lovely. Now, I'd see, like, she showed me, she has quite a few Marseille decks, and she showed me some of the faces. She looks very closely at faces for her decks, and this is her favorite one because they do all have fairly wide eyes and open faces, where some of them have weird eyes that are crisscrossed and, you know, things like that, where she likes these faces, and I do think she has a very pleasant face, and I like how the Emperor and the Empress are looking at each other. And so we have quite a standard, although we don't get so much the lushness, although her shield has not the same thing as his shield is on it. It does say that that's an eagle. It's just a little bit of a different symbology, or different actual look of the eagle than the Emperor. But we do have them both. We have them both outside, which I do like. They are seated on their thrones. I like his crisscross leg in the number 4. Kind of relates to the number 4 there. And again, I do like how they are looking at each other. Here we have the Pope, or who would be the Hierophant, and it's quite similar. We can see the backs of the heads of these, you know, supplicants, so to speak, that are in front of him. Again, very richly robed, very traditional. We have the same staff. I like that we have these almost tattoos on his hand that look to be like the even armed cross, which for me always seems to represent the elements. This card I'm quite in love with, because when I first saw this card, I just assumed, okay, here's a guy, he's officiating at a wedding between these two people, and then we got Cupid up here. But when you really look at this, this is the lover, not the lovers. It's the lover. And so we have Hercules here, who, there's a story about Hercules who's going about along his path, and he comes across 2 women. One is very young and very comely and you know, sensual, and the other is older and wiser and more richly dressed and a little bit more mature, and he has to make a decision about which way he's going to go. Now we do see his eyes looking, I think in the traditional story he picks the wiser woman, but he has his hand, and this is where it gets to be where you really start to look at these details. He has his hand over his heart, where his heart decision, he needs to make a heart decision, and the Cupid is aimed at the younger woman. The younger woman also has her hand over where her belly would be, speaking of possibility of children and things like that in the future. And so it really does bring this down to being about choice in a quite interesting way. I was, again, quite interested to see it. Traditional rider, you know, very traditional chariot. We have 2 horses. They're not really black and white, but they are going in 2 different directions, which, you know, and it's that typical plopped down chariot that we see in the Rider-Waite-Smith, as well as the Thoth, and then obviously here. But we do get that sense of things moving off. We have the canopy. We have the very, you know, armored, chested charioteer, and the wheels in the background. Here we have Justice, looking very justicey and very well covered up. We have the pillars behind her. We have the sword of truth. We have the scales in her hand. You know, this is Justice. Justice is 8, and force or fortitude is 11. I quite like this hermit. We do have the light blues up here of spirituality, as well as the dark blue and the green and the red and the yellow, but there's a lot of blue, dark blue, which was that kind of calm color. But then we do have the bits of passion here in the cloak and in his staff that's moving him forward. Even where the light would somewhat be coming out, we have that spark of passion and will. That's quite interesting when you start to think about the colors that are here. And then we arrive to the Wheel of Fortune, which is, of course, the first of the number 10s. And stability-wise, nobody's got their feet on the ground. There is no stability in this card. That's quite interesting also. But it's a typical medieval Wheel of Fortune, which I quite love because that's what I, learned, in literature. There's a lot of medieval Wheel of Fortune work in one of the classes I took, and so I quite like these standard. These ones have tails too, and clothes. Then we have the Force instead of Strength. But she's not prying it open. She's not like forcefully, horribly, like it's not the grappling one or anything. We do have this on the side. Let's see if we can figure out. It does talk about it not being the domination of strength of the Emperor, but it's more the woman obviously seems soft and gentle. The lion's gazing up docilely. It's self-confidence, personal strength. About self-control, taming your passions, but open expression of your passion, those kinds of things. So it doesn't say anything about that I can quickly read. But that could be to this, obviously, this specific version. Here we have the Hanged Man. I quite like this image. He looks comfortable. He's looking down. I just like it. And it's not, again, all of these I think are pretty easy to read. Here we do have the Death card, which is unnamed. I believe all of the Marseille decks, the Death card is unnamed. It's just the 13th card. And what's interesting is we have sort of skeletal plus some skin. So it's quite creepy. It's like they were tapping into the whole zombie thing back in 1804. And we have hands that are here. Of course, the hands meaning certain things. We have the heads down at the ground where they have been cut off. We do have the scythe of the Revolution, as we have talked about with Lenormand and such. So I do quite like this Death card, even though we're not seeing a lot of sun rising up in the morning. So here we have Temperance. Pretty traditional. We've got the angel figure. Again, still quite fully clothed. We have the 2 cups, so we would think about 2s with Temperance, and so on and so forth. I quite like the Devil card too, because his face is kind of cute actually. Whoops. But what's interesting is that we have, of course, now we have clothes coming off. She is very, very fully clothed. The Devil, of course, is hairy, and so are his minions, who have tails. They're not really people either. They're actually other little devils here, which is quite interesting. But, this is very readable as the Devil card. We've got the chains around the neck and everything. But we can see, obviously, unclothed. And then we do have the Tower, which has regular people who do have clothes. Obviously, their feet are not on the ground. We don't have stability going on here. So we have, it looks like a firebomb from the sun instead of lightning, and so forth. But it's a very recognizable tower. We have the beautiful Star card. I like the bird over here. That little bird just jumps out at me. She, of course, has no clothes on. So now we've moved to not having clothes on. We have the Moon card with the lobster. We have, again, the water, but it's not straight line, so we get the idea of motion. It goes into the idea of the shading and things like that. We have the 2 dogs. We have the towers back here in the background. We have the moon with the yods coming down. Here we have the sun, where both feet are very stably on the ground. They're older. There's 2 of them. There's 2 cherubs in the Thoth deck, but we have 2 quite old. We definitely have a face in both the sun and the moon. But it's just all, to me, so recognizable. am very, obviously have a weird sense of humor, but these butt cheeks right here hanging over give me the giggles. So there we have, very, again, typical. We have the angel blowing the horn, people rising up for the judgment. And then we have the world, which is, again, a very typical world card. So we've reached completion there. And then we get to the pip cards, so which things will speed up, so never you fear. I'm going to zoom out a little bit because we've got to take a look at all of our aces, because as we learned with the Thoth, and as certainly is the case in the Marseille as well, the aces are really important. These are not just the number ones, they are all. Now the courts in this deck are what would be the equivalent of the page, the knight, the queen, and the king. We also have here, I'll split it up, we have what are considered the soft suits, or the receptive of the earth and the cups. And then we have the more hard, what they call hard, as well as the more active and obviously masculine of the swords and the wands. I think these are stunning. They all mean things. The way that the cup is means things. The way that the rod, the way that the wand breaks off into three and is a very rod-like, but we also do have an open, it's hollow. It's almost, both genders shown here, which is interesting. We do have obviously the hands on either side with the sword and the wands. Some people say, oh, it's hard to tell the difference, but if you look, the wands are straight, and the swords are curved, other than the ace, of course. The swords are curved, so it's quite easy to see what is a wand and what is a sword very quickly. So there we have our beautiful aces, which I love. These really are quite gorgeous. Now, we talked about some things with the court cards, just in terms of breaking up the cards in half, and what's the mind and the emotions and the earthly things, and then the abyss. Those types of things don't work as much but there is still movement within these pip cards, just like just like we find in the Thoth. And we can really see echoes in the Thoth when we get to, there's a couple I'll pull out when we get to them to show you. Because I've been working with the Thoth this week, lots of them, the Thoth takes the Marseille and holds a lot of the images and then simply expands on them or modernizes them. So I will obviously go a little quicker with the pip cards. But there's so much about the pip cards as well. So here we have the two curved swords here. On the swords, we do have the Roman numerals on the sides. That's not on all of the suits. We have the 2 and then the 3 going through. Here we have 4, so you can see again that they're curved. We do have the hilts, 4 hilts and then 4 point ends. We have the 5, so we have the stability of the 4 interrupted by the 5th one, causing chaos. Then we have 6, which again is back into things being imbalanced. We have the 7. Then we have the 8, very much fenced in, you can see that. Here we have the 9 breaking into that, and then we have the 10s. Now, then we have the Page of Swords, the Knight of Swords, very active, the beautiful Queen of Swords, and is she looking at the King? Yes, she is. Here we have the Wands, we have the Ace of Wands, the 2 of Wands. With the Wands, we also have the Roman numerals, the 3 of Wands, and these are very much along the lines of, I need to find some Wands, 3, 4. You'll notice in Roman numerals they don't do the minus, like the 5 minus 1 Roman numerals, they do 4. We're not taking away, we're continuing the progression. We have the 5. Here's the 6, looking light and victorious. Here we have the 6 here. Still have the crisscross, it's not done exactly, but we can still see images of it. Here we have the 7. Here we have the 8 of Wands, the 9 of Wands, and the 10 of Wands. But you can see we have in the Wands lots of red. You know, there's more blues and blacks in the swords and much more reds and yellows in the Wands. Although in this one we do have the blues of spirituality as well. We have a very giant wand in the Page of Wands, and he does go on to talk about that. I was going to say the Rider of Wands, the Knight of Wands, the Queen of Wands, who looks so friendly, and now they are not looking at each other, but they are very friendly looking. And then we have the Cups. Now the Cups do not have the Roman numerals. So we have the 2 cups, we have fish up here, we have this JR, which I'm assuming is the artist. We have the 2 cups that are becoming 1 cup. We see this in the 3 of Pentacles as well, where we have that idea almost of giving birth. That almost looks like the fallopian tubes. It does give you this 2 building into the 3. We have the stabilizing of the 4, which is split up by the 5. We have the 6, and then the 7. We have the 8. The 9, very structured here, but not quite to the 10. So here you can see we have the Valet de Coupe, or cup, whatever, which will be the coupe cups. But it is, this is actually, oh wait, this is the cups. We're going to see that again. Oh, did I miss that? Maybe I was wrong. Must be the coins. I think the coins are actually say cups as well. We have the, I like him. I think he looks really sweet. He looks like he's off to quest for the Holy Grail. We have all this light color blue here. So this is the Knight of Cups, the Queen of Cups, and the King of Cups are looking at each other. Here we have the Ace of Coins. I love this 2 of Coins where we have the 1804. Here you can see the Thoth remained quite close to that. I love this 3 of Coins. I really like the coins. We have the 4 of Coins of stability, and then, which we can really see how the Thoth, never going to find the one you want to find. There's too many cards in a tarot deck. There goes my computer. Now you can see the 4 of Coins. This is built a foundation, and you can really see where he's shown that in this card. We almost have a fortress here of how stable things are. And then we have the 5 of Cups breaking up that stability. It's not that it's completely unstable, but this is splitting them off. We have the 6, which can reflect itself. It's a mirror, the 3 and the 3. There's 2 triangles here that all goes into all these symbols that's going on. A dominant color of yellow in this suit. Here we have the 7s. We have the 8s, the 9s, the 10s, double 5s. And then we have the, I don't know which it was, maybe I'm wrong. Here we have the Page of Discs. Oh yeah, here. So this should be the Knight of Deniers, or coins, in its cup. We have the Queen of Cups and the King of Cups, or the Queen of Coins and the King of Coins, and they are looking at each other. She's looks a little bit crankier than the other queens. But there you have it. And there is so much about when it gets to the pip card. We talked about the domains of the suit, where the coins are about the body and physical. Well, this just talks about the general suits information, the soft and the hard suits, which I kind of talked a little bit about, the correspondences, which again, we have the coins with the diamonds, bodies, legs, bull, earth. We got some different correspondences, and then how to go about reading them. And there's all kinds of information on how to do this. That's quite fascinating. This book really has a lot of information, and then it does go through each of the, each card has its own page where it talks about each one. Quite interesting. There's a lot of information there. But my point being is that there is more to it than just, it has its own system. It is its own system of reading, and so it's definitely worth putting putting some work into, and learning this beautiful system that is its own in its own right, not just a stripped down version of the ones that we're used to. So I'm just being an ambassador for the Marseille. And again, this book, I haven't read any other books about this, so I guess I really can't. You can go read reviews. There's reviews on Amazon, but it's called Tarot, the Open Reading by Yoav Ben Dov. Food for thought. It's food for thought. And I know that this is very long, so no, I'm not going to do a reading, although I do intend to read with this deck, as well as with the Thoth deck. But I do want to lay some out. And it does rifle shuffle beautifully. I mean, I'm being careful, but, I'm pretty sure they probably rifle shuffled back in the day. I'm not used to pointy ends, but it definitely feels like shuffling a, It feels like shuffling a low scare beer because it's skinny. People on Facebook have something to say. Okay. Let's just put out a 9 card here. Sorry. All of a sudden, look how gorgeous that is. I mean, obviously to show, I'm going to have to butt them up against each other. The majors really stand out amongst the pip cards. This is just gorgeous. We can clearly see that we have swords here and that we have wands here. We have the ace down here at the corner. There's, so it's definitely, everything stands out really beautifully. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous deck. So thank you so much, Otzi, and I'm really excited to be working with this. It feels like one of those things, again, that is like an experience. The whole opening it, it goes into the experience. And as I said, I have a link in the description box which does have a video of this wonderful shop in which this comes from that it's not a long video. I highly recommend you watch. I thought it was fascinating and wonderful to watch, as well as I'll put a link to their online store. But it's quite an experience to have one of these, and it's priceless. So thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.